Welcome back. So today we're going to learn how to put value on a cylinder to make it feel 3D and volumetric, or in other words, to have form, feel like it's, again, a three-dimensional object. So let's get started putting value on the cylinder. We're going to go ahead and finish out with drawing the basic values on a cylinder. In terms of the tools I'm using, again, I've got my kneaded eraser here in a couple different pieces. And again, we can use this, we can make it very malleable, use that to pull out different values on the drawing, so we're going to be using that. I'm going to be using this 3/4 inch. This is really a cheapie. It was like $2.50, so I mean, really a cheap brush. But it works great for what we're using it for. It's a soft brush, it's a 3/4 inch watercolor. Again, it's a synthetic brush. Very inexpensive, but nice enough to use for our drawing. So it doesn't have to, I wouldn't watercolor with this, but it's great for our drawing. We've also got this, this is just a white eraser that comes in this little extender. It's kind of like a mechanical pencil, and it's just really nice to have. So we're going to be using that. We're going to be using this as well. We're going to put it aside. We've got all the different pencils. We've got the 4B, which is the darkest. Pardon me, these are the H pencils. So we've got basically our 5 pencils. We've got our 4H, our 2H, our 2B, and our 4B. Remember that the H family, those pencils are the light pencils. The 4H is the lightest. The higher the number on the pencil, the lighter the pencil. So a 9H would be the lightest of all. We have the B pencils. Again, they're the darker pencils. The higher the number, the darker the pencil. So I've got a 2B and a 4B. If I had an 8B, that would be the darkest pencil I could have. So from lightest to darkest, we have the 4H is the lightest, and then we're going to go darker from there. The next step darker is the 2H. Well, for the 5 pencils that we have. They make a 3H, but we're going to get the 3H by layering between the 4H and the 2H. So you have a 4H, the 2H is a little darker, the HB is darker than any of those, the B pencils are darker than the HB, the next step down would be a 2B pencil, and the 4B is the darkest of all. So we could reverse that and say, all right, the darkest is the 4B, and then it gets lighter, 2B, HB, 2H, 4H is the lightest. So again, we've got these pencils, nothing new, we've had them before. Putting those out of the way. We've got this little indicator here of the direction of the light. So this, we can see the opening of the ellipse. And what that means is that the light is around the front side just a little bit. It's not, if it was straight, a profile shot, it would be a flat triangle. Because if we view a cone in a certain light, in a true profile, we have no arc, so it flattens out. But as it goes around the corner, you start to see the back side of that ellipse open up. So I can't see the ellipse because it's behind here. All I can see is the top edge. But as it comes around the front, we can start to see the ellipse open up. And it gets more and more open, like we talked about with the pyramid. So this means that this is really sort of a light kind of at this angle. So it's around the front, it's a little bit above it, and the light's striking it, and it's probably striking it somewhere about there, is about where the direct light is striking this, right about there. Now I have to take that out because I don't want that to hamper my drawing. I went ahead and I drew this really light, so you probably can't really see much of it at the moment. But I've got a cylinder. I've got the cylinder that's going to be sitting on a table. Again, the back of this wall is going to be a light gray as far as that goes. So it's going to be a light gray. That's G-R-A-Y. I probably can't read my writing because I have very bad writing. So the good news is all you out there with bad penmanship doesn't mean you can't draw. We've got a table over here that's going to be a baby blue, a light baby blue sort of color. Okay. And then our cone over here is going to be white, okay? So the lights on our, I think I said cone, I meant to say cylinder. We have a white cylinder, so the lights on our cylinder are going to be lighter than any other area in our drawing. We're going to be able to see all 6 form shadows. Now this right here is going to be a flat plane. So this is a cylinder, meaning it's flat across the top. And of course, so it can sit down on a table, it's flat on the bottom. But it's round around the belly. You know, we could think of this as we could put a belt on this thing because it's around this direction, going around the belly, if you will. And we're going to be able to see on here all 6 form shadows. Now, not up here. This is going to be a flat plane. It's just going to be going from darker to lighter because the light is above. This right here is going to be my light values, and it's going to be the lightest of the light values. So I've got LT values are going to be right here on the top of this ellipse, which is the top of my cylinder. We're also going to, so what we're going to be able to see is all 6 form shadows. So remember, we have the form shadows, and those form shadows are as follows. We're going to have our light values, so we're going to put LT values. We're going to have our middle values. Middle values are also referred to as midtones. Tone and value mean the exact same thing. And sometimes you'll hear them called halftones. Halfway's in the middle, tone means value, middle value, midtones, halftones. They're all talking about the same place. And we look for these first. Now we're also going to probably be able to see a highlight on here, at least a soft highlight. Okay. We're also, that's for all the families of value in the light side. Then we're going to have a core shadow only on the round part. So we're going to have our core shadow. I guess I should write this so you can actually read it. So we're going to just put SH for shadow. Core shadow. Oh, I put a T in the highlight. That's not right. We're just going to scratch that out, and we're going to ignore it. So all those English teachers out there don't say, hey, wait a minute, where did you learn how to spell? So we're going to have our core shadow. We're also going to see our dark values or dark tones. And remember, the dark tones are lighter than the core shadow. This is not the darkest, this is the darkest of the form shadows. So remember, these are form shadows. Those are the values that create the illusion of depth, and they tell you whether the surface is round or flat or bumpy or undulating or whatever. So we're going to put form SH for form shadows. We're also going to be able to see reflected light. So we've got reflected light over here in our list, right? So we've got form shadows, and then we're also going to be able to see a cast shadow, at least an indication. Remember, the cast shadows are just an object blocking the light. And then where something actually meets the table, where something touches, like if I put my 2 fingers together, that dark line that's created, that's an occlusion shadow. That means 2 things are touching. So we'll just put, oh, that's supposed to be an L. Look at that horrible writing. OCCLU, occlusion, I think is S. I hope there's one. I mean, is there 2 S's? Yeah, okay, I think there's 1 S. Okay, so occlusion, if it's not, I apologize for all you folks that know how to spell out there. But an occlusion shadow, and that means something's touching another surface. So we're going to see all these. We're going to have a light value here. We're also going to have a light value on the vertical on this cylinder, but they won't be the same value because this is a plane that is on top and the light's hitting it more, and this is a plane on the side where the light will be hitting it less. So the light tones on the side and the light tones on the top are not necessarily going to be the same value. This is going to make more sense once we actually start putting some values down. So again, because this is so light, but we'll go over this in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and start using my 2B pencil. Yeah, 2B pencil. And I'm going to use this 2B pencil. And I probably shouldn't go too quick because I don't want to make a mess. Like I've already started to kind of make a mess. And that's all right. That just means you go, oh, okay. And sometimes to get more control, we kind of, grit our teeth and we use more pressure. We actually want to go the opposite direction. We want to use less pressure and we'll have more control. So we need to, do a little bit. If you need to do some deep breathing and, get into your Zen state or what have you, you really need to relax. If you're too, uptight or tight, or really, worrying yourself about, we don't have to worry about anything. This is just a drawing. We got time. So just, relax, get into it. We're going to be on this, we're going to be doing this for a while, so you're fine. Don't feel like you have to stress anything. It's not like we're doing taxes. This is just, we're just trying to relax and do a little drawing. So, forgive me for any accountants out there that don't find that funny. But anyways, I know I get my blood pressure goes up when I do taxes. Maybe not everybody out there, but just because it just seems a little stressful. We don't want that here. We're trying to do something. Yes, we're trying to keep, certain things in the back of our mind to help us with creating value and shading and all that good stuff. And we do want to be mindful of it, but at the same time, you don't want to worry about it either. You want to, so put on your favorite songs, binge watch some of your favorite Netflix episodes, do whatever it is that you can do to get yourself to relax. The more relaxed you are while you're doing this, the better your drawing will be. So, and I really mean that. That's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be relaxing for us. I don't know about you, but my life is stressful enough. I don't need more things to stress me out. I probably need more things to let me release some stress. And that's what drawing is supposed to be. At least if you're doing it as a hobby. Now, for all you professionals out there are like, well, I don't know about relaxing, because if you're doing something that's gonna decide whether you eat that month or not, there's a different dynamic to it. Doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. It just means there's a different energy, there's a different dynamic, a different expectation. But still, it's much more relaxing even under those conditions than anything I've ever done. So again, I've spent 20 years in the industry, grinding out images and things like that. And even on the most stressful day, it was a far better day than holding down a job at some big superstore or something like that, or working in some corporate office where you have to be a yes man to some terrible boss or something. Something nice about being your own boss. Sometimes he gives me the day off, things like that. If I have to go somewhere for a family emergency, he'll give me the time off. I'm my own boss. There's the downside that you also got to be your own motivator, but that's a whole different conversation. But anyways, that's a whole different conversation. Well, we're starting to get some value here, and the value is going to start to describe our cylinder. Now remember, we're trying to make this look naturalistic. We're not trying to stylize this. We're trying to make this as natural looking as possible, as if we just set this up and put a light on it on a real table somewhere and took a photograph or whatever. We're trying to recreate that sort of an idea, and so we want to be as accurate as we possibly can. And I was going somewhere with that. The idea is that in reality there are no edges, so that's why my lines are so light, because the moment you start putting down thick lines and you can't get rid of them, you've ruined the idea of edges. And there are no lines in nature. You'll hear that said a lot. There are no lines in nature. There are no lines in nature. And what there are sometimes long shapes that look like we would call them a line. There certainly are those, but they are not lines. A line is much crisper, is much different. And many times, and I love the saying, and it's true, sometimes people kind of like, like, what? That lines are an abstraction. They are. Lines are an abstraction of reinterpreting an edge into a line. Because there's certain edges that we might make a dark line, but it's actually not dark at all. Like the ridge of my cylinder here, a lot of that ridge is going to have a highlight running along it and not a dark line at all. So that's the whole idea, that that's a way to demonstrate or illustrate the idea that there are no lines in nature. So I tried to go just one direction when I was first doing this. I didn't do too good of a job over here, but this I was I'm using sort of I used a combination. I started out using a wrist swing and an elbow swing to kind of to lay that in. Now I'm using a finger swing because I want a little more control, because yes, you can see over here that it just begs for a little more control. I'm using my 2B pencil, and I think I'm going to go ahead and switch to my HB. The HB is a little lighter, and that's why I'm going to switch to it, is because I think it's getting a little too dark too quickly, and I don't want it, I don't want that. So what do? I shift to a pencil that's going to be a little lighter. And if the HB seems to be getting too dark in my areas, I'll switch to a 2H. So, don't be afraid to, that's why we have the different pencils, is to give us a little bit more control over things like value and how light or how dark is it going, and also how uniform is the texture and different things like that. We want to be able to control that, and we can use the fact that we have these different pencils to give us more control. Because again, if I'm using a light pencil, I'd have to go over it twice or 3 times or 4 times, depending on which pencil it is, as many times to get the same sort of darkness. Or I might even have to go over it 10 times. So because of that fact, it's going to build up more slowly. We're going to have much more control over it. That's what we're doing with graphite. We're building up our darks. We're making the darks darker by spending more time there. Not by, remember, I'm using a light pressure. We're not trying to crank on this stuff. We're trying to use as light a pressure as we can get away with as we're creating this. Now, I've got this, this is kind of broken through the lines. I want to clear up some of the lines here for the top of my cylinder. And now the white eraser, again, is much softer on the paper. It's not as aggressive as my kneaded eraser. The kneaded eraser, I use it for shapes, and you pounce it or push it into stuff to pull the graphite off. But I was going to show you this too. This is just a little makeup brush as far as that goes, and my wife was going to get rid of it, and I grabbed it. These are really nice. This was a nicer one, but she upgraded or what have you. Do you have to use this? No, but it's really kind of, I don't have a drafting brush with me at the moment. And a drafting brush just takes away your eraser stuff and doesn't disturb too much of the graphite. You can do the same thing with this. So I've got this on hand, and I was just brushing off my drawing a little bit, cleaning it up, so to speak. So we're going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit more. We're always, I get this little makeup brush. And we're going to go ahead and clean up this this line here, this edge. I keep saying line, and that's not right because it's not a line. We don't want it to be a line. We want the what looks to be a line, or what is actually an edge, is created by this darker value against a lighter value, and it creates what we would term an edge, not a line. And usually there's also in the drawing process, you're going to usually be cleaning up, and erasing into stuff to clean up some edges sometimes. Fairly regularly. It's not a big thing. It's not, it's something that you do a lot in the process. So I've got this. I'm going to switch again to maybe a 2H as far as that goes. Here it is. So, and I'm using a finger swing. And I'm actually using the tapered or gradated or feathered stroke, whichever one you want to call it. They all mean the same thing. And it's basically where we're making this just on the downstroke. I'm also using this 2H, so I'm going to have more control because this lighter pencil will fill in some of this splotchiness very, very softly, very subtly. And by taking a little bit of patience and going in here with this, I'm going to be able to get a much nicer result. Who doesn't want a nicer result, right? I mean, everyone wants a nicer result. So, again, I'm going to come over here using my pencils, and I'm going to go ahead and create this value. And again, we're trying to make it more and more and more uniform. And I'm using, again, the finger swing. Now, I've actually got my hand off the paper so I don't touch the drawing, but you can't see, but I'm resting my arm further back, so it's not as so I have a little more control. But if I was smart, if I was a little smarter, I could take like a piece of paper, like printer paper or any sort of paper, and put it down to protect my drawings. I'm just trying to keep my hand from dragging through here because I'm a lefty. And usually, because I was, of course, trained in schools to, just like right-handed people, if you start, you start on the right, you're not, as a righty you come across, you're not going to drag your hand through any stuff. But as a lefty, you do. So lefties that are smart, and again, I really have to kind of undo my programming, and I don't do this enough, should actually start from the left and come to the right. But, and I guess I did do that a little bit, but now I still have to go back into the drawing, in which case, again, you're going to have areas that are going to be worked on. So grab the piece of paper, put it down, and you'll have less issues. That's what we want, less issues. I just wish I had less issues. Probably my wife wishes I had less issues, but whatever. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep on keeping on, as they say. We're going to keep working on this. I'm going to go ahead and bring a gradation up, so I'm just trying to, again, define this edge that's going to be defined by the value. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put a value also down on the table. I think I'll use an HB pencil. So there we go. And I'm going to be using my elbow swing. This is actually a little lighter across that edge, just in one place, and so I went back in there to darken that just a little bit to create that, again, that edge, this idea that one edge is lighter and the other edge is darker. Again, I need to if I need to darken an entire area very quickly, again, I've got now I'm working on a flat surface, so I'm holding this in basically a modified tripod. I've got it as a tripod, but I've got the pencil all the way out here, and I'm kind of tweaking pulling my wrist up a little bit because I'm working flat. I don't normally work flat. but this is basically to help. It films much easier when things are flat. One of these days I'll have to get a little nicer setup where it can be at a drafting table or something. So I have a little bit of an angle because you change your handholds. Normally I'd have a baton or overhand grip, and I'd be using that, and it's a little quicker too. So I'm actually using a tripod, but I'm kind of modifying it to make it feel a little bit more. I've got my thumb pointing up. This like this, and I've got this out of the crook of my hand, and it's just so I can move my hand a little better, and because I know I never draw. You don't want to draw flat. That's not a good idea. Whenever you're drawing, you should be drawing on an angle. That way you don't get carpal tunnel and all that kind of weird stuff. Because there's certain handholds that are more ergonomic. They're better for your hand if you use them. I'm going to go ahead and continue to lay in some value. Again, this table. Now, this tablecloth is, again, baby blue. And baby blue is darker than white. But baby blue is also still fairly light color. I mean, I want this to be a lighter, somewhere about a step 8 on the value scale, somewhere about there. So it's going to be fairly light, and most likely my light gray wall isn't going to be any darker than a step 8 on the value scale either. If you don't know the numbers on the value scale, go rewatch the value scale video, because you want to be really, you want to know those numbers. So when I call them out, you're kind of like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm there with you. And again, remember with the value scale that 10 is white and 1 is black. Now sometimes you'll see a value scale that reverses that relationship. Like when I was trained, it was black was 10 and white was 1. But the one we're using that's a little more common these days than the one I was trained in is usually that white is 10 and 1 is black, and it refers to light. 100% light on a white surface is white, and 10%, 90% less light is going to be a really, really dark. Well, you still have the lights on. Once the light goes out, everything goes black. But that's the idea. It refers to light. 100% light. We're going to have that white is going to be, brilliant. And then as you drop down, 10% is going to get darker. As you drop down the light even more, it's going to get darker and darker and darker and darker. And that's what the value scale is referring to, is that relationship. So I've got a little bit of this, of the top of this table with at least a bit of a value. I can go ahead and try to perhaps make a little bit of a gradation, so work a little bit more at the back, or start at the back and come out towards the front, so that my lights on the table are towards the front of the table and not the back of the table. I can certainly do that. And again, by doing this, our little cylinder is starting to emerge. Now I'm going to grab my 2B pencil again. Once more, I'm going to using this 2B, I'm going to start to indicate some of the cast shadow. So again, we're just going to start to put in some of that darker value for that cast shadow. Now the cast shadow is going to get a little bit darker as we work on it. And this drawing is not about the cast shadow. We just need enough of the cast shadow for our eye to go, okay, cast shadow, I'll buy that. Again, there's so much to the drawing, we just have to be close enough that someone says, yeah, that looks fine. and then they can ignore it. Like again, this drawing should not be, if people are staring at my cast shadow, I've done something wrong. If, however, the cast shadow is good enough that people are ignoring it and looking at the cone, or pardon me, not the cone, but in this case the cylinder, that's where I want them to be looking. So there can't be anything funky happening with the cast shadow. There can't be some weird texture thing that I did, or you know, where I got too much of the lines showing through white lines because I didn't uniformly try to keep my value a little more uniform as I was making it. You know, anything like that is going to start to distract the eye, and the eye is going to become aware of the fact there's something weird going on. There's something different. When I say weird, that's usually mean there's something different going on that's not going on elsewhere in the drawing, and you don't want that. You want just enough for people to ignore it, so they don't think anything is wrong. And it's kind of like sleight of hand with a magician. With a magician, you know, with one hand they're trying to distract you, so the other hand can, or so they can perform the trick. You know, that's sleight of hand. Don't look at this hand, look at my other hand. And we're doing the same. It's a visual sleight of hand that we're trying to create, where we want it to look so that good enough or correct enough that people don't focus on it. That doesn't mean that the other areas are going to be, you know, funky or what have you. It just means that we have to do everything, or, you know, most things within a good enough degree that they can be ignored. And that's a good thing for us. Okay, so I was using a lot of an elbow swing a little bit through this. I was also using a regular finger swing. Now I'm using that gradated stroke or feathered stroke. Again, some people call it a tapered stroke. And you just have more control. Okay. And again, as you start to, the more you draw, the more you'll start to switch back and forth, and you won't even think about it. There's so many times when I'm doing these videos, I have to kind of look at my arm. I'll go, oh yeah, I'm doing this, and I'll look. I'm like, wait, am I really doing that? And sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm actually doing something else, because I'm just not thinking about it. And that happens quicker than what you think. Yes, I've been drawing for a long time, a couple decades, and all that good stuff. But you know, when I was first starting this, you know, drawing for my first year, you know, within just a month, you were actually kind of that point where you're like not thinking quite so much about, you know, what you were doing, you know, with which particular swing. And so it happens quicker than some might think. Now, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to use a little bit more of the brush on this drawing. And when you use a brush, you use it to do one of two things. It's either you can lighten an area, because when you brush it, it's going to get a little lighter. You can also brush something because you want it to have less texture. Okay, so, or you can soften an edge. It'll soften an edge, it'll soften a value, but it'll also soften texture. So again, I could come in here and soften the texture of my drawing. And I could use this guy, or I could even use this guy if I wanted to. Again, this brush. But again, this is just going to soften it. It's going to take out some of the, and this will save me a little time too, but I could have brushed this whole thing with the with my 1-inch brush. It's just this one is bigger, so it covers more area. Okay. So now we've softened everything up just a bit. Okay. Now again, you're never done when you do that. You never just leave it and go, oh, okay, well now I did the brushing, now I'm done. No, you're gonna have to. It's still a little splotchy. It's still got some stuff going on. Whenever you brush something or smear it or blend it, it starts to look dirty a little bit. So we don't want it to look dirty. You know, so we could go in here and, you know, start to create gradations, because my gradations got blown out when I did that. So that's something else I don't want. I could come over here with my knead eraser, round it off on the bottom and pounce with it, to lighten up certain areas. So you can do that. Now with this kneaded eraser, it's hard not to create a texture of some sort. And so I might have to try that and then come over here and see if I could, you know, brush it back a little bit, soften that texture. I could take and use this very, very gently and very, very lightly to, again, erase, you know, away some of that graphite. Just, whoops, that's starting to be a line. That's all right, we can take out that line. Right now I'm trying to get more sort of a gradation using my eraser. This is dirty now, so I have to, you know, mold it back into like that. Flatten this out a little bit. Okay. So I'm just flattening this out just a bit so that it's not, that way it'll be a little softer, and overlapping these little pounce marks, I can start to get, again, a gradation. And now if I was trying to do textures, I could, you know, leave some of that texture there. If I wasn't trying to do texture, I could come in here with a 2H. I could fill in this lighter line that happened because of my eraser where it, you know, made too much contact. Made that into a light line, and I can just fill that line in until it disappears. So, again, I can use this 2H. Got a little bit of splotchiness all over the place because I used that eraser. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that I'm going to have to go in here and fill that stuff in. And I can. It's really not a big deal at all. Okay. And this is where graphite, you know, sometimes people are like, wow, why does it take so long to do a drawing? I mean, don't you just do it and leave it? Well, if you're doing a lot of this, you know, textures, and, you know, every time you blend something, you have to go back in and reestablish the values. You have to go back over it with a layer of value. And so you're constantly going back into this stuff to get the drawing to do what you want. Now I had a 2H there. I think I need to be a little lighter for some of these little areas, and for that I could go in with my 4H. And I can still see some of the little pounce marks. But if I come in here and I start to fill those in, they will disappear. Again, that's part of really learning how to deal with, I mean, you can do the same thing with your papers. Like, there's some weird parts on this because it looks like the paper got a little beat up. And what I mean by that is probably was between some sheets of paper, like a pad. Yeah, this is from a drawing pad. And if those papers rub against one another, it starts to raise the fibers, and graphite doesn't like that. So it'll start to make some weird splotches start to happen in your drawing. And that's kind of always the case, unless you're using nicer paper, then it's, you know, there's less of that. So if I was using illustration board that I went and paid $4 or $5 for a 30 by 40 sheet, then cut them down into 11 by 14s or something, that's going to be less likely to have those imperfections. And it can take a little more abuse, as some people would call it, because it's a nicer paper. It's made a little better. And so, you know, if I even sometimes even just changing the paper, you'll hear people talk about leveling up and how to get better and all this sort of stuff. And sometimes there's little things you can do to put you in a better, you know, you'll get a better drawing even without changing anything. If you change one thing, you can get a better drawing. There's certain pencils that are a little clumsier to use than others, certain brands, because they're really not a professional pencil. So the material, so that happens all the time in my painting class. People will come in and try to use this really bad student grade paint, and I'm like, you don't want to use that. And they're like, well, why? What's the difference? Well, the difference is huge. And as an artist, it's mostly the pigment. There's higher pigment in the better paint. That's why it's more expensive. And if you're trying with paint, it's all about how good your paint is. With oil paint or acrylic paint, what's your pigment load, as people would say. I'm using just a very controlled tripod grip and things like that to put in the occlusion shadow. But the materials themselves, sometimes that's a good case of it when you go from, saying, using a student grade paint to a professional grade paint, or even a high-end student grade or low grade professional. Those are just in a whole different ball game than the student stuff. The student stuff is terrible. Don't use it. Better to limit your colors and get professional paint than to use 24 colors with that are actually student grade. So we're continuing on again with this occlusion shadow. Like so. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to come in here and start with on the cylinder. Again, we've got a lot going on with we've got the background that we softened. Again, the background, these are the baby blue and the light gray are probably about the same value, but they're at two different. This is a horizontal plane, so the light is hitting this more directly, and a vertical plane, the light is not hitting it as directly, and so two values will be two different values if there are two different angles to the light. The one that's more direct will be lighter. The one that's less direct will be darker. And that's what's happening on this wall. This wall, because it's a vertical plane with a light source that's at an angle, the light's going to be hitting the table much more so than the wall. So that's why I'm trying to come in here and darken the wall, because right now it's almost the same value here as here. That's not what should be happening. Same thing over here. We've got this wall here and the tabletop, and the tabletop should be lighter than the wall. And so I'd come over here and start trying to get gradation on this wall. So we would just continue, making this wall. We're going to do some more of that. But we're to the point where we've got enough value that we can see, hopefully, our cylinder, very well. And usually I'll do this. I'll draw my background and my areas around the cylinder or the object that's going to be the main event, and that way we can relate the values one to another. Okay, so again, we're just gonna keep working on this and moving through this to continue continue this drawing and get our drawing finished off. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna come back and we're gonna work some more on this. Take care. All right, welcome back. So we're gonna go ahead and get back into this. Before we left, we just softened a little bit with the brush, and again, I use this just to save some time, but I could have just as easily used my 1-inch brush to have done my blending and stuff. What we're going to do now, though, is whenever we want to crisp up an edge, a 4H or a 2H is a really great way to crisp a line. So I've got my 4H pencil here, and I'm going to just very quickly try to crisp up the line, making it a little darker next to that edge. So this is lighter, this is a tiny bit darker. That makes the edge look sharper. So whenever we have, again, whenever we have two edges come together, one goes darker and one goes lighter. And the higher that contrast, the more that's going to really show up. That edge is going to pop, as they say. It's going to have a lot of contrast, going to catch the eye. Jump out at you. It all means sort of the same thing. It's going to be really eye-catching. So again, I'm using a finger swing. I am using the gradated stroke or tapered stroke, and I'm using a 4H pencil. And I'm just trying to, you can crisp up some of the edges a little bit, and do the same thing over here just a little bit using this 4H pencil. Okay. Now again, when we soften these edges, again, it kind of blended them down a little bit, and if we wanted to, we could bring a little more contrast. I can grab my HB pencil, and I'll come in here with this HB pencil and come against this edge and make a gradation. Like if this was a table and this is the wall, as the wall comes down into the light, it gets lighter, but then as it starts to tuck behind the table, it'll start to get a little darker. And it's a quick gradation, but we got to be careful that it's not, if it's too much, it'll look like this right here that looks kind of like a, you know, like a bar of darker value, and we need to make that have a gradation to push it out. So we're going to start at the darkest part, come out a little further, start at the darkest part, come out a little further. Now right now I'm just using a regular finger swing. But actually I'm not even using a finger swing. My fingers aren't moving, it's my wrist. So I'm using a wrist swing. And I can cover more area that way, and I can work faster. And again, by this layering, we do lots of layering in graphite. That's how we get the subtlety, that's how we get things to really, the magic to start to happen, as some people might say, is all from that layering that we do. And the really neat part about this is as one edge goes darker, the other edge looks lighter. So again, it's all about the relationship between these values, and we're going to see this happen more and more and more as we get more and more of our value relationships where we want them to be. We're just barely starting to get them kind of where we'd like them to be right now. This is still a little bit too much of a bar, or a band, or it just looks like a rectangle. So I'd have to come up here and what do I have? Oh, I have an HB. I'm like, why is it getting so dark so quickly? So now I can get, I'm making that gradation, and it's happening a whole lot easier. But I had a 4H before and it wasn't doing much. Now I've got my HB and it's going darker more quickly, which I'm having an easier time making my gradation. So again, sometimes you might be like, well, again, if the pencil's not doing much, if it's too light, go to the next darker pencil. Now this is still in the light side, so I don't want to go too dark with that. Over here because the light will move across the surface, lighter to darker. So this should be darker here than it is over there. So it's not right now. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It's almost darker here than it is over here. So I'm going to come over here, and I've got a 4B pencil, and again, this will go darker much more quickly, and I need to make it darker in order for this to look correct. And again, I'll start at that edge, come out a little bit, start at that edge, come out a little bit more, start at the edge. You know the process. This is just, we're going to keep doing that until we start to get a gradation. Now that looks like a band. Now what that means, we want to push it out further and further and further, and so again we start to get a nice gradation happening of value. And that's, you know, this is where, again, you put on your favorite music, you can put on your favorite, you know, Netflix channel or whatever it is you watch. Maybe it's the, you know, Amazon Prime or just whatever your favorite channel is. Put on your favorite show and listen to it while you work, because we're going to be here a while, and that's okay. That's how the control happens. That's how we make it work. And the purpose of these videos is this is supposed to be in real time, and the reason it's in real time is not to bore you to tears. It's so that you can work along with me. And you know, if you think you got it, well, then just turn it on and listen to it while you're working on your cylinder. And in fact, much of this video, I expect you to be working on your own and only listening to me and kind of glancing up every couple of minutes to kind of see, or if I'm saying, oh, I'm using this technique, take a glance, you know, see what it's up to, and then look back down at your work, you know, because you really, that's how you're going to learn. It's not going to be by watching me. It's going to be from, you know, doing it yourself. And again, the reason that we have this in real time is, again, you could fast forward it or reverse it, and all these things as you're making your own little study of a cylinder. This is something just like you could watch someone, you know, and I've used this analogy I think in this class before, you watch someone jump rope all day long, but you're not going to learn how to jump rope until someone hands you the rope and you start skipping your feet trying to get that rope underneath them to the correct rhythm. Otherwise, you're never going to learn how to skip rope. And it's the same thing with drawing. You have to put the time in. You have to practice. And hopefully you're taking this class because you enjoy drawing, and so in that case, practice is fun. You know, and I certainly enjoy it. And that's just for anything, you know. It's not just drawing. It's nothing unique to drawing. It's the same thing if you're trying to learn an instrument. It's the same thing if you're trying to learn to snow ski or water ski or whatever your thing is. Ballroom dance, it could be. If you're going to learn to, you know, do a West Coast swing, you're going to have to really put the time in to learn the basic steps, and then as you go into then some basic turns, some basic leading movements, and you know, and you'll keep, as you practice and get better and better, you'll start doing harder and harder routines, and that's how you learn. That's the fun part. This works no matter what you're doing. Practice is, you know, where you learn. Practice is how you learn.